The roar of fame. Roy Savage was a man who thrived on attention. With his brightly colored shirts, cowboy hats, and a cane topped with a golden tiger head, he was hard to miss. As the owner of Savage Safari, an exotic animal park in Texas, Roy had built a reputation as a showman. His park was home to dozens of big cats, especially tigers, and it was his passion for these animals that initially drew people in. Years ago, Roy started the park with the noble intention of rescuing tigers from illegal traders and private owners who couldn't care for them. He dreamed of creating a sanctuary where these majestic creatures could live safely. His charismatic personality quickly turned Savage Safari into a popular destination. Tourists flocked to see the tigers up close, and Roy's social media presence exploded. Videos of him playing with the big cats, feeding them, and even wrestling with them went viral, earning him millions of followers. To his fans, Roy was a hero, the Tiger King, who had an almost magical connection with the animals. However, running a park full of exotic animals was expensive. Feeding, housing, and caring for tigers required a lot of resources, and the costs were always rising. To keep the park afloat, Roy had to get creative. He started hosting live shows where visitors could see him interact with the tigers, and he charged extra for private tours that included close-up encounters. Roy was a natural entertainer, and people paid handsomely for a chance to see him perform stunts with the tigers. But as the park expanded, so did the demands. Underneath the bright lights and cheering crowds, Roy's ambition began to cloud his judgment. He started to make decisions that were less about the welfare of the animals and more about keeping the money flowing. Rumors spread that he was breeding tiger cubs to attract more visitors and even selling them to private collectors. But Roy dismissed the claims, insisting that everything he did was for the love of the animals. Despite the growing concerns, Savage Safari's popularity continued to soar. Roy's eccentric style and bold persona made him a household name, and people were fascinated by the world he had created. For Roy, the park wasn't just a business. It was his empire, and he was the king. But as the fame grew, so did the whispers of controversy, setting the stage for a much darker chapter in his story. The rivalry ignites as Savage Safari's popularity skyrocketed. Not everyone was enamored with Roy Savage's flashy displays. Diana Brooks, a dedicated animal rights activist, saw through the spectacle. She ran Wild Heart Refuge, a sanctuary nearby that focused on rehabilitating animals rescued from circuses, zoos, and illegal trade. To her, tigers belonged in the wild, not in enclosures where they performed tricks for paying audiences. Diana had always been wary of Roy's operation, but as rumors of unethical practices began to spread, she became determined to take action. Diana believed Roy was exploiting the tigers for profit. She had heard whispers that he was breeding cubs to keep a steady supply for his shows and private tours, even though he denied it. To her, it was clear. The tiger cubs were being used as money-making props, only to be discarded when they outgrew their cute, cuddly phase. Roy's business model, she argued, was built on a cycle of exploitation, and she intended to expose it. Determined to protect the animals, Diana launched a campaign against Savage Safari. She gathered evidence, collecting testimonies from former employees who spoke of overcrowded enclosures, insufficient medical care, and illegal trades. Diana reached out to the media, presenting her findings and calling for an investigation into Roy's practices. She also took her fight to social media, where she shared videos and posts condemning the mistreatment of big cats in captivity. The campaign quickly gained traction. Animal rights organizations joined Diana's cause, amplifying her message. Meanwhile, the public became divided. Roy's loyal fans defended him, accusing Diana of being a jealous competitor trying to ruin his business. But the mounting pressure forced Roy to respond. He accused Diana of spreading lies and trying to sabotage Savage Safari, claiming she was driven by envy and a desire to steal his spotlight. The rivalry turned into a public spectacle. News outlets ran stories on the heated feud, with headlines like Tiger King versus Animal Activist, the battle over big cats. Both Roy and Diana appeared on television, trading accusations and trying to sway public opinion. For every piece of evidence Diana presented, Roy had a counter-argument, insisting that Savage Safari was a sanctuary, not a business. But as the spotlight intensified, so did the scrutiny. Authorities began to pay attention, And what started as a clash of ideologies quickly became a full-blown investigation, setting the stage for Roy's empire to face unprecedented challenges. The fall of the king. The pressure on Roy Savage had reached a breaking point. Diana Brooks' relentless campaign had forced authorities to launch a full investigation into Savage Safari. Initially, Roy was confident he could weather the storm, dismissing the allegations as baseless rumors spread by jealous rivals. But as investigators began to dig deeper, troubling details surfaced that even Roy couldn't ignore. Inspectors found evidence supporting some of Diana's accusations. Documents revealed questionable transactions, suggesting Roy had been involved in illegal tiger trading. They discovered that he was indeed breeding cubs, not for conservation, but to keep a constant supply of young tigers for his shows and photo sessions. The cubs brought in tourists and money, but as they grew older and more difficult to handle, they were quietly moved out of sight, with many sold off to private collectors and unaccredited zoos. The revelations hit the news, and Savage Safari's image crumbled overnight. Media outlets, once captivated by Roy's colorful personality, now turned against him, portraying him as a cruel exploiter of the animals he claimed to love. The man who had been celebrated as the Tiger King was now a symbol of greed and unethical behavior. As the investigation intensified, authorities discovered more evidence of mistreatment, enclosures that were too small, poor veterinary care, and cases of animals suffering from malnutrition. Roy's inner circle began to fracture. Longtime employees, fearing legal consequences, started to speak out, confirming suspicions of shady practices. Those who had once been fiercely loyal to Roy distanced themselves, unwilling to be dragged down with him. His world, built on charisma and spectacle, was starting to collapse, and he felt more isolated than ever. Desperate to defend himself, Roy went on a public offensive. He accused Diana and her allies of orchestrating a smear campaign, trying to paint himself as a misunderstood animal lover targeted by extremists. But the strategy backfired. For every defense he put up, there were new accusations and more damning evidence. Footage surfaced showing Roy mishandling the tigers, treating them roughly to maintain control during his shows. Eventually, the authorities had enough to charge him with multiple counts, including animal cruelty, illegal breeding, and violations of wildlife trade laws. Savage Safari was shut down, its gates locked, and Roy was arrested, facing a lengthy legal battle. The Tiger King, who once ruled his exotic empire with swagger and showmanship, had fallen, brought down by the very ambition that once made him a star. Consequences and redemption. Roy Savage's empire lay in ruins. After his arrest, Savage Safari was permanently closed, and the once bustling park stood silent, its enclosures empty. Roy, who had built his identity as the Tiger King, now faced a harsh reality. In court, he was charged with animal cruelty, illegal breeding, and violations of wildlife trade laws. The evidence against him was overwhelming, leaving him little room to defend himself. As his trial unfolded, the world watched the downfall of a man who once seemed untouchable. Roy's attempt to justify his actions didn't resonate. He claimed he had always acted out of love for the animals and that his goal was to protect and save them. But the evidence told a different story, one of profit-driven decisions that compromised the welfare of the tigers he claimed to cherish. Witnesses testified about cramped, dirty enclosures, poor veterinary care, and the heartbreaking reality of tiger cubs bred solely to entertain visitors and then discarded when they became too costly to maintain. It became clear that Savage Safari was less a sanctuary and more a business built on exploitation. The verdict was inevitable. Roy was found guilty on multiple counts and sentenced to several years in prison. For many, it was a moment of justice, a victory for the animals who had suffered under his care and for those who had fought to bring the truth to light. Diana Brooks, whose tireless efforts had helped uncover the truth, was hailed as a hero by animal rights advocates. She worked closely with authorities to ensure that the remaining tigers and other exotic animals from Savage Safari were relocated to reputable sanctuaries where they could live out their days in peace. Behind bars, Roy had time to reflect on everything that had happened. Stripped of his fame and power, he began to see the flaws in the empire he had built. For the first time, he understood the harm his obsession with fame and money had caused. It wasn't easy, but he started to make amends. Through letters and phone calls, he reached out to conservation groups, offering to share insights on how to better protect wild animals. He knew he couldn't undo the past, but he wanted to support efforts to end the illegal trade and mistreatment of exotic animals, even if it meant doing so from a prison cell. Diana, who had once been Roy's fiercest critic, acknowledged his efforts. While she couldn't forgive everything he had done, she saw his willingness to change as a small step forward. The public's fascination with the Tiger King gradually faded, but the story left a lasting impact. It sparked a broader conversation about the ethics of keeping wild animals in captivity and led to stronger regulations on wildlife conservation. In the end, Roy Savage's story was not just about a man who lost his empire, but about the price of unchecked ambition and the possibility of redemption. His fall from grace served as a cautionary tale, reminding the world